All right, so let's look at some of the challenges that we face running a business where we need to do after-hour support calls and how On-Call Manager can help. First of all, it takes the place of these very expensive answering services. The other thing too is that some organizations want to have a live answer and some organizations want to have the callers go to voicemail. We support both, so you could do either live answer or voicemail, and we'll talk about what I mean by live answer here in just a bit. Or you can do both, where it comes into a live answer. Effectively, you're sending callers to a queue, and then agents answer the call off of the queue. So they'd be set up to be remote agents to that queue. And then if nobody answers the call in the queue, you could fail over to the voicemail and then use that mechanism. We'll go into details about that. So have some flexibility there as to whether you take live calls. One of the challenges that always gets involved here is keeping track of who's on call. And so On-Call makes it very simple to set up reoccurring schedules so that maybe I'm on call every third week or something like that. You can set up those schedules once and let it run, and you really don't have to touch it again. So flexible reoccurring schedules. We also provide multiple channels for how people can get notified. We support sending out telephone calls using text-to-speech, emails, SMS, text messages. And this is important because the more channels, the more mechanisms that you use for notification, the more likely it is that the person on call is going to get those notifications. Whereas if you just send an email, you get one beep on your cell phone and that's it. I don't know about you, but I'll sleep through just about anything at 3 o'clock in the morning. Escalation, so that's also a feature that we have. So if the person on call for whatever reason doesn't respond, we can escalate to level 2 to level 3 up to 30 levels, and you can have multiple people in each level. So in theory, you could have everybody in the entire company being notified eventually. We'll talk a little bit more about that as I show you how that goes. And then another important aspect is monitoring performance. Am I meeting my service level agreements that I have commitments to our customers? Are the people that are scheduled to be on call answering the calls, and how long does it take them to take the call, and how many attempts does it take to wake that person up? Or are they just blowing it off and saying, I'm not going to do it today, I don't feel like being on call today, and I'm just going to let it roll over to somebody in level 2? So accountability is an important aspect of On-Call Manager, and I'll walk you through that. On-Call Manager's user interface is web-based, and that's important because that means that if you're the manager and somebody calls in sick and says, I'm not going to be able to be on call, you know, my kids have the flu or whatever, you need to be able to get access to configuring who's on call. So the fact that it's web-based means that you can effectively get access to On-Call Manager from anywhere and change schedules, do whatever you need to do in order to get that done. So just log in with your 3C extension and voicemail pin, and that'll get you access to the system. I should point out that this is running on an old dog machine, and so it's a little bit pokey sometimes. So right now it's going out to 3CX and it's verifying my extension and PIN that I typed in. And I think the best place to start with this is probably on the People's tab. This is where you create resources that you can schedule to be on call, right? So you give them an extension number, you give them a name, This is really, the name is really about identifying who it is that you're interacting with. What's their cell phone number? By the way, this extension number is really just any kind of unique number. It doesn't have to be an actual extension number. Um, it just needs to be a unique number. And this is important if, for example, I carry an office phone and I have also, I want the phone to ring at my house and I want it to ring on my personal cell phone. You could put the same person in multiple times so that they can have their own personal email as well as their work email. So lots of options here for adding more people. So that extension column just needs to be a unique number. That's the only thing you need to know. So you specify the telephone number that we're supposed to call, the email that we're supposed to send the emails to, and the last one is the SMS text. Now, in the United States, it is universal that the cell phone carriers have an email to SMS text gateway. So in this example here, you can see that my entry here has got a cell phone number at, and then the domain name of the carrier's email to SMS gateway. So essentially what it does is it takes the body of that email and it converts it to a SMS text message and then sends it to that telephone number. Whether or not that is true in other countries around the world and in Europe, I'm not sure how common it is for carriers in other parts of the world to have those email to SMS gateways, but that's how we do it. If you guys don't have that as a capability and SMS is really important, we can look at building um, a specific mechanism for sending SMS to you guys. But the nice thing about this is that it's free, so you don't have to pay for text messages. You can text as many people as often as you want, and it really doesn't cost you anything. So that's why we chose this approach. Easy to set up. Let's talk a little bit about the two gray columns on the far right-hand side of the screen where it says contact and update. Contact, this is where you identify how I want to be notified when there's a new request for assistance. So again, remember we can send telephone calls, emails, and SMS text messages. And I suppose if you were a very light sleeper, you might not want to use a telephone call mechanism for getting notifications because it wakes up your whole house with the telephone ringing. So you have the choice of defining how you want to be notified. Um, and then the slightly darker gray for the update. This is what happens when I've been previously notified that somebody is needing some support and someone else answers the call because maybe it's escalated up or maybe you have multiple people scheduled to be on call. If somebody else handles the call, then I'm going to send a notification to you that you don't need to get out of bed. Somebody else has handled it. And in that case, I could see it being very reasonable that you not wake up the house with a telephone call simply to tell you that you don't need to do anything because it's already been handled. So again, you can choose how to be notified when the initial contact comes in, and then how you can be notified when the call's been answered. You can delete people clicking on this icon. You can add more people clicking on this icon. So this is where you set up the resources that are available. The next step after you've defined who your potential on-call staff are is to set up a schedule. So if we go in here to the scheduler, I'll explain what this monitored extension thing is in just a bit, but let's get you the overview first and then we'll go into the details. So you can see I set up 2 people to be on-call resources, Samanth and myself. And you'll notice that Samanth is level 1 and I'm level 2. And we'll talk a little bit about the level 1 and level 2. But let's talk about how these things got here. Let's remove this one here. So I'm going to edit the series. There we go. So now you can see that the recurring schedule for Samantha is gone. Now I have the flexibility of specifying a date and a time range by selecting the specific hours that this person is on call. But 9 times out of 10, that's really not necessary, because how does somebody let you know that they need support? They're going to call your office number. Maybe you have a specific support number. Maybe you have just a general office number. Somebody's going to call you on the phone, right? And that telephone call is going to get routed based on your holiday schedule or um, your office hours, those kinds of things. So you're going to handle how a call gets to on-call manager through the regular means within 3CX. So you're not going to send somebody to on-call manager typically when you're inside your regular office hours, right? So what you can do is you can just click on this gray bar up here and you can choose a new all day event. And then you don't have to worry about the hours, because they're never going to get to on-call manager until it's outside of your regular office hours, right? That's the idea anyway. So we'll put a label in here and we'll call it level 1. And you can see over here, this is where you actually select the various levels, so up to 30 levels. And let's say that we want this to be a reoccurring schedule. So I'm on call every other week, and I'm on call for the entire week. And I'm going to be on call forever until I'm no longer employed or until I'm removed as a resource for on calls, right? But you can see here that you could do it that I'm only on call for 10 times and then I'll have to do it again for a year if you got enough staff doing it. You get the idea. So we say, okay, then it's going to go through there and it's going to add all these people, this person on call. If I look at this from a month perspective, you can now see that that Samantha's on call level 1 every other week, Monday through Monday, right? But you can also see that I'm on call for very specific hours as opposed to all day. So a lot of flexibility in how you create these reoccurring schedules. But the nice thing is that you don't have to go into 3CX and change forwarding rules. You don't have to pass cell phones around, the support cell phone from person to person. You just do it. All right, so that's the overview of how you create resources and how you schedule them. Let's talk about some of the more detailed aspects of how you set this up. So let's go into settings, into general settings. And a question that I frequently get is, who is going to be managing this? Can anybody get in here, or can only some people get in here? Because I could imagine a scenario where I don't want to be on call, so I'm going to go find one of my coworkers and make them be on call. So you really want to control who has access to make changes to the schedule. And so when you initially set up on-call manager, you specify who the managers are, and then only those people can go in and make changes to the schedule. Um, a, a agent, if you will, can go in and look at events and add notes and those kinds of things, and we'll go over that, but they can't change the schedule. Now, if you don't select anybody, uh, whoever was in here last doing some testing, if you don't select anybody like this, then effectively everybody is a manager. So when you first set up on-call manager, when you first install it, anybody and everybody is a manager. And then if you want to restrict who has access to the schedule, you just go in and you check who has access to the schedule and press save, right? So that's how you control who has access to what features. Um, let's talk a little bit about the difference between, let's see, let's go in here and let's start with legacy. Um, as I mentioned, my sister is a physician, and the last thing she wants is for a patient to be able to call her cell phone directly at 3 o'clock in the morning. She wants the patient to leave a voicemail about her symptoms, so that she can take a look at their symptoms, maybe go to some resources and look at potential ailments that match the person's symptoms, what the current um, uh, approaches are to dealing with those symptoms, maybe do a little research and then call the person back. I don't know how you'd feel, but if I called the doctor's office and I got a doctor answering the phone at 3 o'clock in the morning and they're saying something like, hello, hello? Who is this? Who's calling me at 3 o'clock in the morning? I wouldn't feel real confident about that, right? So some people want to have the opportunity to take a look at things and find out what's going on before they return the call um, to the customer. On the flip side, there may be circumstances where you very much want to have a live answer. And the example that I like to use is, let's say you're a plumbing company and you've got customers where you put a toilet in their basement. You help finish their basement. You put in the plumbing there in their basement. One of the kids flushes a toy down the toilet and it starts overflowing. And dad says, well, I know how to fix this. And he goes over to the toilet and he turns the handle the wrong way and breaks off the handle. And now you got water pouring all over the basement, right? That's kind of a really big emergency thing. And so if I call my plumber and I get a message that says, thank you for your call. Um, your call is important to us. Please leave your name and number and somebody will call you back in the next 5 minutes. I'm going to say to myself, this is a plumber. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. I can't hope that he's going to call me back. So I'm going to go to Google and I'm going to start Googling plumbers and I'm going to start calling plumbers until somebody answers the phone, right? Because I just can't be sure that that plumber is going to answer the call. So in some situations, you might want that call to go to a live answer person. So let's start with the voicemail approach. So a customer calls, it says our offices are now closed. If this is an emergency and you need to talk to a support engineer, press 1. Please be aware that there may be a charge if you don't have a support contract. Whatever the message is that you wanted to say, they press 1, transfers them to voicemail. You use the regular 3CX built-in messages where you can say your call's important. We promise we'll get back to you within 5 minutes. Leave your name, your number, and a brief description of your problem, and somebody will get back to you. All right, so the customer's done that, left a voicemail. What happens? So on-call manager goes and looks at the schedule, and it sees here's the voicemail for, I don't know, maybe it's networking, maybe it's application development, maybe it's security, whatever the organization is. Maybe it's um, pediatrics, maybe it's, whatever group it is that needs to do it. It's going to come into this calendar and it's going to see who's on call for level 1. Okay. And it's going to say, okay, Samanth is on call for level 1. So let's get back here. So I'm going to call Samanth, and the number of attempts, the number of times I'm going to try to call Samanth is 3 tries. If he doesn't answer the voicemail within 3 tries, then I'm going to escalate to level 2. How long am I going to wait between calls? Well, let's give poor Samanth 5 minutes to wake up and find his glasses and listen to the voicemail and figure out what he's going to do before I wake up the whole house with another telephone call. And then how many levels am I going to escalate? You could set up a whole bunch of levels if you wanted to, but typically I think people do 1, 2, 3 levels of escalation. This feature just basically says I'm not going to escalate beyond 3 levels. And what that means is that if there was nobody scheduled for level 1, it's not going to fill up the event logs with a bunch of notifications that say there's nobody on the schedule for level 4, right? So this is, you could set this to 99. It doesn't really change how the application works. It just changes what's being logged for the most part. So Samanth is going to get called 3 times. He's going to get a telephone call. He's going to get an email. He's going to get an SMS text message. Then it's going to wait 5 minutes. And then it's going to check to see if that voicemail was heard. If the voicemail wasn't heard, it's going to call him, email him, and SMS text message him again. And it's going to do that 3 times. And after the 3rd notification, and it's waited the appropriate length of time, if he still hasn't responded, then it's going to go to level 2, which is me at the moment, right? And it's not going to let Samanth off the hook. He can't just ignore it and after 3 attempts he's off the hook and he's not going to get notified anymore. No, it doesn't work that way. He's on the hook until somebody answers that call. So it's going to add to the list of people being notified everybody in level 2. So it's additive. So he's going to get pounded at a minimum of 6 times, right? Every time for level 1 and then every time for level 2 and so on. So eventually everybody in the entire company could be getting notifications, right? So that's how that works. But what if we want to do the live answer thing first? And then if nobody answers the queue call, then we can fail over and use this legacy approach of using voicemails and escalations and all that stuff. So let's go in here and take a look at monitors. So you remember in that combo box, when I went into the schedule, it was asking me to select the name. This is effectively, you could call this the group name if you wanted. So this could be pediatrics, or it could be networking or software or security or PCs or web hosting or whatever it is. This is the group of people that are going to be notified. This is the schedule, right? So this is really just a name to give to the group. Let's talk a little bit about how queues work. If you have a queue and there are no agents logged into the queue and a caller is forwarded to a queue in 3CX, 3CX is going to look and it's going to say, I have no agents logged into this queue. So it's going to immediately fail over to wherever you direct calls if there's no agents logged into the queue. So we can't just transfer a caller to a queue. We first need to figure out who's on call and then log them into the queue and then transfer the caller into the queue. And how do we have that happen? Well, we have a call flow designer application. So when the caller comes in and dials your company number and it says our offices are now closed, if you need support, press 1. On that digital receptionist in 3CX, you're going to transfer the call to extension 800, which is a call flow designer application. That call flow designer application is going to look at the schedule, log in the appropriate agents into the queue, log out anybody who's not scheduled to be on call out of the queue, then transfer the caller to that queue so that there are agents available to take that call. Now you might ask, how long does it take for all of this to take place? Is the customer wondering what the heck is happening? This all happens within milliseconds. So they don't even realize that they've been transferred to extension 800. Okay, then on call, the call flow designer application will then transfer the call to extension 500, which is the queue that you set up for this particular group to take support calls, right? And it's going to do exactly what 3CX always does. This part of the process is just native 3CX stuff. Um, so you set up remote agents in 3CX and the call hits the queue and it's going to call those people that are in the queue, and you can use whatever polling strategy you want for that queue. Maybe it's prioritized hunt, maybe it's ring all, however you want to handle it. This is all just normal 3CX stuff. But there is one thing that you have to be careful about, and that is how many rings does the support tech's cell phone allow to ring before it goes to the cell phone voicemail. We don't want it to go to the cell phone voicemail. So with pretty much every carrier in the United States, you can contact the carrier and you can increase the number of rings before that phone goes to voicemail. Some carriers have dial codes that you can do from your cell phone to increase the number of rings before it goes to hold. Some you have a website and some you have to call them and set it up. But you can set it up to a fairly lengthy number of rings before it goes to voicemail. But let's say for whatever reason, maybe it's 3 o'clock in the morning and the guy that's scheduled to take the first level queue calls, his phone died, or maybe he forgot he was on call and he went to the movies and he turned his cell phone off. For whatever reason, that call doesn't get answered in the queue, where does it go next? Well, then it goes to extension 006, which in this case happens to be some months voicemail, but more likely you'd create a dummy extension for this called pediatrics or networking or something like that would be the extension's name. And so it will then transfer the call as the failover for the first level queues to extension 006, where it then the caller is prompted with something like, sorry, all of our agents are currently busy. Please leave your name and number and we'll get a technician to call you back. Oh, by the way, I wanted to make one other notice that's important. If I get a telephone call that's, if I call in for support and it sends me to voicemail, I'm going to be anxious about that. But if I get sent to a queue, what's going to happen? I'm going to hear a message like, your call is important to us. Please wait while we find the next available agent. And then they hear on hold music. And so the customer is no longer wondering whether or not somebody's going to actually be aware that this voicemail is. They're assuming that there's people that are getting telephone calls and that the system is trying to find an available agent. That's much different than leaving a voicemail and hoping that somebody wakes up. It feels a lot different to the customer. So it really depends on your organization as to whether you want to use live answer or if you want to use voicemail as a mechanism for handling these after hour support calls. So what do you do if you don't want to use first level queues? Well, it's real simple. You just don't put anything in the first level queue field. You just make it blank. And then it knows, well, I'm going to go first to, well, I guess technically you could not put anything in the in-out IVR, and you could put nothing in the first level queue, and you could transfer the caller directly to extension 006. And because on-call manager is monitoring 006 for any new voicemails, it'd start off right away. I don't, I don't manage this software anymore. For those of you who don't know, I'm a developer, a software programmer, and most of our tools were initially written by me, but we now have a team of somewhere around 60 full-time programmers now. So I have long since handed these applications over to other people to support and to develop and enhance these tools. Sometimes I come into these applications doing a demo like this, and there's a new feature there, and I didn't even know it was there. So I get surprised every now and then. In any case, well, what are these last two things about here? New prompt and heard prompt. Well, if you remember when we went into people, we identified mechanisms for how people are notified when a new call comes in and how they're notified when a call has been handled. And so when we make a telephone call, this one here, what happens? Well, what happens is that when we see a new voicemail come into the voicemail box, we're going to look and see on the schedule who's on call. And then we're going to look at how they've requested that they be notified. And if they've selected to be called, what on-call manager will do is it will call that person that's on call and join them with an IVR, a digital receptionist that you've set up. And that IVR is going to say something like, you have an after hours support request on the networking voicemail box extension 006. Please enter in your PIN to get access to the voicemail box, something like that. So we need a mechanism for you to be able to record whatever the message is that you want to present to the agent that's receiving that telephone call. So when you go into monitor, we need to identify what's the digital receptionist that has that prompt. And then what it's going to do is after you're going to set the digital receptionist. Do I have it open? Yeah, here we go. Let's just do it this way. So I need a digital receptionist. We're going to go into a digital receptionist. Let's see if they set this up correctly for testing purposes. So, well, this one's going to connect them to a queue. Okay, fair enough. In the voicemail approach, you would have no options here. And then on the destination, if invalid input, you would put 999 for voicemail. And you would say it transfer to, I think you just put connect to extension and then you choose 999. Yeah, choose 999. So what happens is the digital receptionist plays the pre-recorded message and then automatically transfers them as soon as the prompt is finished playing, transfers them to 999, where 3CX then prompts them for their extension number and PIN. They put in the extension number that was mentioned in the pre-recorded message prompt that's associated with that digital receptionist so that they know which extension to listen to the voicemails. So going back to monitors, and then same thing with the heard. When we see that somebody has heard the voicemail, that's the key to stopping the escalation of notifications is you get into the voicemail system, you listen to the voicemail. Now I know somebody's assigned themselves to handle that particular call. That's going to tell on-call manager to look at all the people that were previously notified. And so if there were multiple people in level one, or if there were people notified in multiple escalation levels, I'm going to go back and I'm going to call them on the phone, assuming that in people that they selected call as mechanism for being notified that the call's been handled. And so again, I'm going to make an outbound call to the persons that have been notified previously, and I'm going to play a message. So you'd want the message to say something like, um, the after-hours support request for pediatrics has been answered, something like that. So it just plays a message and hangs up. You don't have to push any buttons. You don't have to do anything. All right, so I think I've walked you through the aspects of setting up on-call manager, live answer or voicemail, or a failover from queue, live answer queues to voicemails. You can use any combination of these things. And when I set this up, when I designed this screen and I went to monitors, this is, it's called monitors because I'm either monitoring queues or I'm monitoring voicemails. But this is where you define what voicemail box I'm going to monitor, for example. And again, you can add as many monitors in here as you want, right? Okay. All right. So calls have come in. They've been handled. What's next? All right. So let's take a look at events. And it's complaining because I made changes, but I didn't save the change, and that's okay. All right, so there's going to be two rows in this table, typically. One row will be, give me a list of calls that have come in that have been heard, and give me a list of calls that came in that have not been heard. And these then expand out. So in this sample data, I received a voicemail on this date and time. Let's take a look at the details. So I see that the customer, and by the way, the person that was on call and the person that was doing the test call, it was the same person, but normally you would see the customer's caller ID information in this field. You would see which voicemail box they called in to. You would see the type of transaction this row is, which is I received a new voicemail. There won't be any notification indications on here because this is just a row that represents this is when the call came in. So I know what time the call came in, right? Then I see that somebody on level 1 was notified. Who was notified? Samantha was notified, and this is the group. This is also the group that was notified. And then we see at this time, call was heard, meaning that he went into voicemail and he listened to that voicemail. So I know when the call came in, I know who was notified, I know when they were notified, and I know how they were notified. And in this particular case, it looks like he was just testing the phone notifications. But if he had also selected SMS or if he'd selected email, there would be check boxes in here as well. Now, what happens if we sent an email and the email was not successful because the email address was no longer valid, or he changed his cell phone number, or for whatever reason, the call or email or SMS text message didn't go through? If they didn't go through, then there will be no checkbox. If they did go through, there will be a checkbox. So now the agent who was on call, if he comes to his boss and says, I didn't get any telephone calls, you go in here and you look and you can see how was he notified and was the call, email, or SMS text message successful. So there's really no room for him to say, I didn't get the call, because you can go in here and you can check and you can see that the call did indeed take place. So no more excuses. How else is this helpful? Well, we talked a little bit about service level agreements where you're saying that you will respond to your customer within 10 minutes. Well, I had a scenario where this happened. The customer the company that was using On-Call Manager was an IT services company. They had a 10-minute SLA for their servers. The customer's server went down at 11 o'clock. He called in to On-Call Manager at 11 o'clock, and Joe was notified. So Joe got the call and he immediately logged into the voicemail and he heard the message from the customer that said, "Hi, this is Bill over at ABC Plumbing Supply. Our servers are down. I need somebody urgently to call me back and get in and fix it. But I'm going to need to give you remote access to the servers," or for whatever reason, he needed to call the person back, right? So the agent called back the customer at the number that he left on the cell phone, and it immediately went to voicemail. So he waited 15 minutes and he called the customer back again and again and again. And he did this for a couple of hours, but the phone always went directly to voicemail. So he couldn't get a hold of the customer, and he said, you know, screw this. I've been trying to get a hold of this guy for 3 hours. I got to be to work in 2 hours. I'm going to go and try and get some sleep. And he went to bed. But before he went to bed, he went in here and he added some notes. And he said, "I called the customer back at the telephone number that he specified, and I called him in 15-minute increments until 6 o'clock in the morning, where I finally gave up and went to bed." Right? So he saved a note about this. And so the owner of the company drives into work, and he's usually there at about 8 o'clock, and he gets to the front door of his building and there's the customer, and the customer is just reaming him out, screaming, yelling that he's unhappy, that he had an SLA and he lost business because nobody answered his call, and he wants discounts on his bill, and I'm going to sue you, whatever, right? He's very upset. So the manager goes, "Oh crap, I wonder what happened. Well, let's come into my office and let me look and see what's happened. Let me find out what's happened." So he logs into On-Call Manager and he says, "Yeah, I can see that your call came in at 9:55. I can see that Joe was notified at 9:55. I can see that Joe answered the call at 9:55. Oh, but look, here's some notes that Joe left. Let's take a look at those notes." He says, "Oh, look, he tried to call you at the number that you specified, but it kept going to voicemail." And then the customer goes, "Oh, dang, that was my cell phone and it died shortly after I left the message. My bad. I'm sorry for getting upset. This was my fault, not your fault." So now we know, yes, we met our SLA. Yes, we know what happened, who did what. We know who answered the call. We know everything about this call. And so if at the end of a contract, the customer comes back and says, "You know what, you guys just weren't meeting our SLAs, and I want a discount, or whatever," right? You can go back and you can look and you can see, well, did we really miss our SLA? Oh, well, okay, yeah, we missed our SLA once in a year. We were 15 minutes instead of 10 minutes. Is that really a situation that justifies discounts or refunds or anything like that? Maybe we need to just put some numbers in front of the customer and say, "Look, here's all of your calls." And by the way, you can filter this. So I could put in here, well, I can't really filter it because I only have one thing, but you just put in 006. So if a call comes from 006, it's going to filter that out simply by putting in the telephone number. But they all match, so you didn't really get to see anything happen on the screen. I suppose I could do this. Let's try putting in some month and see if it filters the rows a little bit better. SUMANTH. There we go. So you can see just putting in simple information, a date, a time, an extension number, a customer name, who the agent was. So if you're doing an agent review, you could just put in their extension number and it would show you all the times that he was notified so that you could quickly see, what percentage of time did that agent answer the call like he was supposed to, and how many times did he allow it to escalate, those kinds of things. So it's all about accountability. Okay, so having said that, that's pretty much it. I think I've hit, there's one little nicety here that we didn't go over. If you want, you can change the colors. So if you want to put them to the customer or to your colors, you can do that. Um, and you can change the title. Um, what are we doing? ABC Plumbing. And apply that. It'll change all the colors. You can put your own logo up there, browse to the logo and put your own logo on the screen. So you can customize it to be more like your company stuff. Also, I don't think we hit the licensing screen and the email screen. So this is, remember, it has to send emails, so you need to specify an email account that it can use to send emails. You can have the voicemails transcribed. So maybe you don't want to transcribe all of the voicemails within your organization, but you do want to transcribe those voicemails that are associated with on-call. You can do that. And this is where you would put in your license key to register your license key and activate the software. So I think I've hit everything at this point. It shows who's logged in up here. If you're in a different country and your dates are formatted differently, you can change the culture so that it changes how dates and numbers and those kinds of things are displayed on the screen. So that's what that's all about. So let's look at the conclusions that we have. On-call manager allows you to eliminate very costly answering services, and that alone may pay for the entire subscription. So on-call manager may pay for the wallboard and exporter and all of our other tools. The savings that you get by eliminating an answering service may pay for the entire subscription and all of our tools. And oftentimes will save money. So the net result is that it actually costs you less to have all of our tools than it would be to continue to pay that answering service. We have the ability to handle, no more needing to go in nightly and changing the forwarding rules or handing off phones. The right people get notified on the right day, and if they don't respond like they're supposed to, we're not screwed because we can escalate up to additional people if somebody doesn't answer like they're supposed to. We provide multiple ways of notifying people: phone, email, SMS, text messaging, and we can monitor compliance both by employees and by our SLAs. We can track performance on how we're doing, both as internal staff and meeting our SLA requirements. So guys, that's it for the presentation today.